So when we started out on Friday night, we basically started in 2 Corinthians 1, and our ending verse was, Paul said, hey, we learned not to put our trust in ourselves, but in God, who raises the dead. Well, he's back to that theme again, 2 Corinthians chapter 4, and we start back in verse 13. And since we have the same spirit of faith, according to what is written, he says, I believe, therefore I spoke. And we also believe and therefore speak, knowing, not hoping, not thinking, not wishing, knowing that he who raised up the Lord Jesus will also raise us up with him and present us with you. Verse 16, therefore, because of that resurrection promise, because of this confidence we have in God, because we don't have to worry about the condition of these vessels, but the treasure that is within us. Therefore, we do not lose heart. Doesn't matter what you're experiencing, doesn't matter what you're going through. It's okay to be sad, it's okay to be anxious, it's okay to be depressed, but losing heart means we give up. Therefore, we do not lose heart. Even though the outward man is perishing, the inward man is being renewed day by day. For our light affliction, which is just for a moment, is working for us a far exceeding and eternal weight of glory. While we do not look at the things which are seen, but the things which are not seen, for the things which are seen are temporary, but the things which are seen are eternal. Paul says there's a perspective you have when you encounter crisis. And when you run into any kind of difficulty, when you run into any kind of struggle, when you run into any kind of tribulation, you can look at the external. You can look at this stuff. He said, or you can look at the internal, the inward man. And although the outward man is perishing, and by the way, when you were born, you started dying. I don't know why we count up our birthdays. We should have a clock that runs down. Dying is as natural as being living, as being born. We come into the planet the same way. We all leave the same way. He said, but even though the outward man is perishing, the inward man is being renewed day by day. And when you think about this temporary part of earth and compare it to what else is out there, our light and momentary affliction, that little bitty part of this is building up. It has impact on something far greater and far longer. The light in momentary affliction is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. And we don't focus on the things which are seen, but the things which are not seen. Because the things which are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen is eternal. And Paul says you have three basic perspectives. You can spend your life thinking about the external, or you can spend your life thinking about the internal. And if you think about the internal, then you have a focus on the eternal. I was teaching at the police academy. They built a brand new police academy, and I was teaching across the hall from where they train the cadets. I do a class called Crisis Intervention Training. I do some talking about how you de-escalate situations. If a police officer gets sent to a call, and it's a mental health call, it's not something that you need, handcuffs or tasers. Well, as I was teaching, there was this terrible noises coming from across the hall. It sounded like they were strangling cats. I mean, it was terrible. So we take a break. I walk out. Training advisor, T.A. Jordan, stepped out in the hall. I said, what are you doing to those kids in there? He said, it's taser day. Also, we're tasing the cadets. He says, would you like to come in and show the cadets how a man gets tased? Sure, why not? So I go in. He said, now you may want to take your shirt off and put one of our shirts on because we're going to poke these two holes in you. And so I walk in there, and he said, we're going to grab you on one arm. Somebody grab you on the other arm. They're going to say, spotter's ready, spotter's ready. We're going to say, taser, 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 and then we're going to zap you. He said, you get hit with 50,000 volts, and it'll last for 5 seconds. Now, these kids, when they were getting tased, and my wrestling shoes are older than some of these kids in the academy. Well, you would think they were torturing them. You'd think they were murdering them. They were making noises I didn't know a human being could make. Well, I'm standing there, they go, taser, 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 pop! they hit me with the thing, and as they lower you to the ground, because you just lock up, it kind of feels like a good chiropractor appointment, but as they lower you to the ground, they whisper a color in your ear. And if you don't lose your composure, then when you get on the ground and they release the electricity, you tell them the color. My color was magenta. I don't know why they gave me magenta. I wanted something a little more manly. But then they asked me to talk to the cadets. I said, what you have experienced here is a biblical principle. You deal with something that's temporary, and then you have the rest of your day. They spent their whole day dreading being tased, and they'll probably spend their whole day talking about being tased. But here's what happened. You get tased, it lasts 5 seconds. They lay you down, you rise up, and you change. That's Christianity. 5 seconds. Paul says this is 5 seconds compared to the rest of it. Now you can spend your time focused on the external, or you can realize I've got an internal that was designed to be eternal. Therefore, we do not lose heart, for even though the outward man is perishing, the inward man is being renewed day by day. For our light affliction, which is just for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. While we do not look at the things which are seen, but the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporary, and the things which are not seen are eternal. For we know that if our earthly house, this tent, and notice he doesn't compare this a dirt jar and a tent, not a mansion, not something that's permanent, not something that's substantial. A tent, you know the difference between your tent and a house. For we know that if our earthly house is destroyed, this tent, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. And for this we groan. We earnestly desire to be clothed with our heavenly habitation, which is from heaven. If indeed we have been clothed, we shall not be found naked. For we who are in this tent groan, being burdened, not because we want to be unclothed, but because we want to be further clothed, that mortality may be swallowed up in life. Now God, who has prepared us for this very thing, has also given us a Spirit as a guarantee. We know that if this thing is destroyed, we have something better. I mean, that's... Just think about that. And it doesn't matter what you're going through. And I'm not minimizing what you're going through. But it's 5 seconds. And you get rid of this temporary, and you get something that's eternal. And it lasts. That's what eternal means. And he says that we're not desiring just to be unclothed, because when we get rid of this, we're not just going to be a free roaming vapor. See, when you die, you don't become a spirit. You've always been a spirit. And it's not that I want to be unclothed, but I got to get rid of this to get the other one. And once we get unclothed, once we lose this body, we get the thing that's real. And then he uses this phrase, when life is swallowed up, or when mortality is swallowed up by life. Now, if you read books and watch those silly vampire movies that came out with the glowing, the sparkly vampires. You know, that tragedy, the little girl who's a mortal falls in love with an immortal, right? Well, the big tragedy there is that we think that when something is mortal, what swallows up mortality? Well, I would have told you death. I had a conversation with my daughter when she was a little bitty girl. I think her hamster died or something like that. You know, you sit there and you go, look, honey, everything that lives dies. Hamsters don't live as long as dogs don't live as long as people. People don't live as long as trees. Everything on this planet dies. She looked at me and said, are you going to die? Yeah, baby, one day I'll die. Is Papa going to die? Yes, honey, everything that lives dies. She looked at me and she put that little fat hand on her chest and she said, am I going to die? Baby doll, everything that lives dies. And then I discovered this verse and I had to call her back. And I said, everything that lives dies, but everything that dies lives. When mortality, read your verse, when mortality is swallowed up by life. I don't die and cease to exist. When I get done with this, the dirt jar, the mortality part, what replaces it is life. And it's not this external, but it's the internal that will last eternal. That's what I'm looking for. And so Paul says you've got this perspective that everything that lives dies, but everything that dies lives. And God has designed us for this very purpose. It's not accidental. God created us to have an eternal existence in His presence without one of these. There's maybe one or two people who cry at graduation, but you went to school to graduate. And when you graduate, the rest of your life begins. You came here to graduate, and when you die, the rest of your life begins. I saw an illustration one time, and I really, really liked it. If this little black rope represents your life, whatever it is, 75, 85 years, my dad's 86. If this is your life and you only focus on this thing can get cut, it can get knotted, it can get frayed, it can get worn out. That's the external. This is a climbing rope, and a climbing rope has a sheath called a kern mantle, and inside that is where the real rope is. And you have this core of all these little bitty tiny fibers. That's what gives this rope its strength. And what really makes this a rope is not this stuff. This is just a kern mantle sheath. But this is the core of the rope. It's 100,000 twisted fibers that give it its strength. And this is the external, but this is the real rope. This is the internal. And when you understand the nature of the internal, God said that this internal part of you will be eternal. So if this black spot, if this black streak represents my life, my 70 or my 80 years, let me put you in perspective. There's that black rope in perspective with eternal. In fact, it's not even fair to say that this represents eternal, because this would represent not your life, but every human life from let there be light to when the trumpet sounds. And when all human existence, this little black spot, gets compared to what else is out there, this is what you've got to live forward to. This is what you've got to look forward to. And it goes on and on and on and on. And I'm going to ruin my life because of something that happened right here. No, the things that happen here impact everything after that. And God has given us the Spirit as a guarantee. And so if I'm suffering, if I'm hurting, if I'm lonely, if I'm depressed, if I'm bereaved, if I'm grieving, I can focus my existence on this external part. But when I'm done with that external part, my internal part is eternal. And it goes on and on and on and on and on and on. And this rope actually has an end. There's only 400 feet in this bag. It has an end. Eternity does not end. If you could just picture me sitting here just pulling rope to, and it just never ends. You're suffering right now, this temporary moment, though the outward man is perishing. When you're done with this is what's left of your story. And it goes on and on and on and on. And the only reason that we don't give up and we don't lose heart and we don't despair is not because of the external, but because of the internal. Because God has promised us the eternal. For this we groan, earnestly desiring to be clothed with our heavenly habitation. If indeed we have been clothed, we shall not be found naked. For we who are in this tent groan, being burdened, not because we want to be unclothed, but further clothed, that mortality may be swallowed up by life. And God has designed us for this very purpose. And He gave us the Holy Spirit as a guarantee. I don't know what you're dealing with. But I promise you, whatever it is, it's only 5 seconds compared to the rest of what God has in store for you. And if you're not a New Testament Christian, you'll live forever but won't be with God. But if you are a New Testament Christian, then you live this rest of your life in the presence of God and the angels, sinless, sickless, no worries, no pain, no suffering. And if you're not a New Testament Christian, becoming a Christian won't make your cancer go away. It won't make your spouse come back. It won't rebuild your house. But it will tell you that once you get through with that 5 seconds of whatever it is you're dealing with, you have something else prepared. A house not made with hands that God designed and gave you the Spirit as a guarantee. And if you're not a New Testament Christian this morning, we invite you to come and become a New Testament Christian so that this part doesn't matter and you live for this part. Won't you come this morning while we stand, while we sing?